Hi, this is Christophe, having a conversation with the marvelous Justine. Now, Justine, what's the topic of today?
Hey, I was thinking about talking today about how the loss of someone, and it might not even be people that have passed over. It could be the loss of someone that's even alive, like an old relationship, or how the loss and how grief affects us long term, and how a lot of our sessions tend to end up being reconnecting people with people that have either passed over, or even, like I said, grief for people that are still here, but the connection's gone. Yeah, I thought that would be quite a good conversation.
Okay, and can you give, or can you start with a specific example?
Yeah, I can give you an example just of people that I've helped along the way, where people could come to me for things like weight loss or just totally unrelated things. Like I've had people come to me for a fear of flying, which is crazy. But when we're working on the person, the sensational feeling that comes up in their body ends up going back to the death of someone without saying goodbye. And it might not have happened in the last year or two. We might be talking about working with a 45-year-old woman, and we're going back to her as a child at 5, losing a grandparent, and it's amazing how that loss or that experience has kind of, had an experience after experience and made something, like I said, someone coming in for a fear of flying, and in the session we're suddenly working with grief that's been sitting in the body forever, and the symptom that the body's presenting with, a totally unrelated symptom, such as a fear of flying or anger or weight gain, ends up going back to this moment, and then we shift that moment and their life changes. For me, it's amazing how the grief and loss, especially without saying goodbye or without understanding, can really affect people in heaps of ways. And I know, Christophe, we've had a conversation about this before, and I know that you experience it as well with your sessions, that it's something we tend to do quite often.
Well, what do you do if this item pops up in a session?
What do I do? So what I tend to do is if after working with shifting whatever's going on in the body, because I work a lot on shifting the energy that the person has in their system, if I found out that it did go back to the loss of someone without saying goodbye, I take people back to the last time they saw that person alive, and we create almost like a goodbye scene where we have the energy of that person come in a beautiful light, and they say to that person what they never got to say, and they hear and they have a conversation. So the person in an altered state will tell me what that person is saying back. And now it might be imagination, it might be real. I tend to go more on that this is real and that we are communicating with spirit, but I don't know. Like, who knows what's real and what's not? And whether it is real or imagination, I tell you what, it creates healing. It allows the brain or the part of the person that's grieving to not need to grieve anymore. It gives some closure, and it's such a powerful session. So it's reconnecting the person with a loved one and giving the goodbye that they needed to have. But what I tend to do is once we've sent that person to the light, I get them to imagine that person coming behind them and putting their hand on their shoulder, and when they do, bringing in a beautiful, loving, strong feeling. And then I tend to tell them that from this moment on, anytime you think of that person, all you're going to feel is love and support. So in the past, they might have felt sadness and grief, or what we call grief, whereas now when they think of that person, they'll feel love and support. And it's just creating that connection that was lost, if that makes sense.
Would you agree that before they can actually let go of the person who was passed away, that they have to make a connection again?
Yeah, and that's totally what we're doing by bringing that energy into a space where they can talk and have the conversation that they didn't have, or feel like that person is there. And then, of course, doing the goodbyes. So everything is about connection. They lost something, and a lot of them lost it immediately. And I was thinking this week, I'm seeing so many people that are grieving, not loved ones that have passed over, but they're grieving people that are alive. They're grieving relationships that ended, that they didn't want to have ended. They're grieving the loss of people that they're waiting for. They're grieving friendships that ended. And so in my mind, I was sitting there thinking, this whole grief thing, it's not always people that have passed on. A lot of the time people are grieving without even realizing it, the loss of something that maybe even they never had. Maybe they met someone and it was a connection and they believed that person was the one and it didn't happen. And maybe they're grieving something that didn't happen. So we've got walking wounded people grieving something that didn't even happen, due to the connection. I'm seeing it so often. And these people are not moving forward. They're not getting on with their lives. They're not meeting people because they're hurt, or grieving, like I said, the loss of something that might have not even been there. So, for me in the last few weeks, this has been quite something that I'm seeing quite a lot of. And I was thinking in my mind, well, how can we help these people? Because it's so similar. I imagine grieving someone that has passed, having that closure and making something final. Yeah.
Would you think that guilt and shame is involved with the grieving process?
I tend to so when I look at emotions, I like to not so much put a name on them. What I feel happens is that when we trigger our mind and our body, like think of a person, a sensation comes up in our body. And then we try to name that sensation. So it might feel like guilt, it might feel like shame, it might feel like hurt and grief. And for me, I tend to, when I work with a person, I tend to take all those names away and just work with what's in front of me, meaning when this person gets triggered, a sensation is happening in their body. From that sensation, then they give that sensation meaning. And so the front part of the brain kicks in and goes, this feeling in my body must be shame. It must be guilt. It must be because I'm a bad person. It must be because someone's thinking about me. So what I like to do is just step back from our thinking and just go, when I'm triggered, this is how my body feels. And then we work on shifting the energy of what's going on in the body, take away the meaning of it, and bring the person into a space that they can still think about that person and miss them or do whatever they do, but not have such a body response that's going to stop them moving forward. Like for me, it's so say if even we were dealing with someone that's passed over, if when someone thought of that person, they felt an overwhelming heaviness and it made them want to stay in bed and sad. By shifting that, by doing what we do to shift the energy of that so that they feel good, it doesn't mean that they're not going to go, oh, I'm so glad that that person's passed over. They're still going to feel lost and sad and all those things, but it's going to be in their mind, meaning they're going to think, oh, he died 2 years ago and, and I'm quite sad about that, but they'll still be able to move forward. They'll still be able to get on with their life and have the thoughts going on, which we can work with thoughts. But it's when the heaviness or the sensations in the body are so overwhelming that it stops people in their tracks and they can't move forward. that's when we have a problem. So for me, I think the question was about guilt or shame. For me, I tend to try and get out of the head and into the body and not name what's going on, but just know that there's some charge in whatever event happened, and we need to get this charge out of the body. We need to let this charge go. Once it's gone, then we're just working with the thoughts. And yeah, thoughts can be annoying, but when a thought doesn't have a charge to it, another thought will just come in and take it over. You know what I mean? It's a lot easier for us to switch that when it doesn't have this body thing going on. So I tend not to look at it as naming things, but just stick into what's going on in the body at that time.
Wonderful. So once again, it's about letting go of old emotions, old feelings, and shifting them, and feeling again the connection with the past, with your loved one who is passed away.
Yeah.
And then they can ask whatever they would like to ask, or start a discussion or whatever with that person who is passed away, so they can actually feel the connection again and have a new start, I guess.
Yeah. So for Christophe, I know you do this a lot as well. When you think back to your clients, what have people come in for that you can think of in your mind that you've ended up doing this process, this kind of, I know you do a little bit different, but what kind of things have you seen turn into being the loss of someone?
Can you be a little bit more specific?
So like with me, I've had I've had clients come in for fear of flying or anger or weight loss, and we end up doing a session where there's grief or there's the loss of someone randomly. I know you're the same, where you've had people coming in and you end up doing that process. What kind of things have you had people come in for that ended up going back to grief?
It is difficult to name something specific. It's rather general. I mean, people could make an appointment to come to us with a specific problem, a specific topic, and then we start working with that, and suddenly something else pops up. But generally, this is something which and I guess also you, check because if this grief is still active, it controls at a subconscious level the well-being of our client. Yeah. But of course, most of the time when we are working, it suddenly pops up and it becomes dominant at that moment, and we go in the moment and do whatever we need to do at that specific moment. So it might be the case that someone comes to us with a specific question, I lost my child, or I lost my partner, and then we kind of know before we start a session that grief will be a topic. And in all other cases, it will pop up and then we deal with it, because this is normal for us. And it is really important that our clients can benefit from reconnecting and letting go of the old grief. Yeah. This is normal. I mean, take a look at our culture, whether it is in New Zealand or in Europe or wherever. It's part of our culture. We let go of people, we mourn, we grieve, but it doesn't need to be this intense. I mean, if I take my own example, my father passed away when I had the age of 18, so I was quite young. And I had the idea it was all sorted out. But at the age of 32, when I had my first spiritual experience, when I still had sleep apnea, I found out that the sleep apnea was connected to the grief of my father. And I I had the idea it was all sorted out. So I had no conscious special grief memory or whatever. And it's yeah, the feeling was stuck in my body, and my body was reacting to the feeling. So most people have these issues, and they're absolutely unaware of it. They just don't know it's still active. And when it pops up in the session, we just work with it.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yeah. And like you said, sometimes it's really fascinating when it goes back to, you know, a 4-year-old that suddenly had even sometimes pets going, and, you know, grandparents and going, and we're talking stuff that's at the deep level of consciousness that the client would have no awareness of, but in the sessions it's there and it's powerful. And when you shift the energy of it, their life changes. It completely changes. It lets go of what, you know, what they're coming for. Yeah, so I thought it was a good thing to talk about today, because it's bringing it to the awareness of people about how past experiences, you know, grief and things like that really do, you know, play a role in the problems that we have in our life now. So it's something to really look into.
Absolutely. Great topic.
Yeah.
So a quick question for our listeners: if you have another question, or if you want us to discuss a certain topic, let us know. Reach out and we'll see what we can do. I'm not saying that we have all the answers, but for sure we can give our idea. So thank you for listening.
We will see you later.